Dark Discoveries is a podcast that dives into the darker corners of history, mystery, and the downright bizarre. We discuss real events that may include graphic details, adult themes, and strong language. Not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
We're here to inform, entertain, and maybe make you laugh nervous in public, but never to glorify the criminals or make light of their victims. Our research is thorough, but hey, we're not perfect.
We don't claim to be historians, so if we get something slightly off, blame Jimbo. All opinions are our own, and sometimes even those are questionable.
All right, guys, welcome back to Dark Discoveries. I'm your host, Jimbo, and tonight I'm joined by You Know Him, You Love Him.
You hate him. Dustin.
And
I'm going to take Jimbo's thunder.
Well, first I was going to say sorry, Jackie's not here with us right now. She's off on another excursion, so Dustin, go ahead.
See, you're still trying to take it from me. You have to be number one.
No.
I'm number one in the number two business, so I'm okay with that.
That's what I heard about you.
We are
poop
here
cruise.
with, for the first time, we're here with James Bond, 007.
I am so excited to be here. I thought my voice sounded a little funny during that disclaimer you guys just played, but you know what? I'll go with it. I'm not afraid.
You will be.
We'll see.
So for those who don't know, Bond is my co-host on the Tragedy of Cinema podcast. I think it's been right around a year and a half that he's been on there with me since Kyle left. So he decided that he wanted to come on here. So tonight on Dark Discoveries, we're going to be talking about the true story behind the movie Dog Day Afternoon. But not only that, this is going to be a special double episode because once you get done listening to Dark Discoveries, the true story, Dustin is coming on the Tragedy of Cinema to talk about Dog Day Afternoon, the movie with Al Pacino.
You totally missed the opportunity to say it's a double feature.
Well, it won't be a double. You do know what a double feature is, right, Dustin?
Yeah,
a double feature of the same movie.
Yeah, the double feature.
Just have fun with it, okay? You don't have to be perfect. It's a double feature. It's a summer double feature, okay?
It's a summer.
You
get me not once, but twice.
I say pop some popcorn, sit back, relax, put on some headphones, and enjoy this double feature.
Right, because there's going to be words in here that I'm sure Dustin will not pronounce correctly, like every episode.
Any name I can't pronounce will be Fred, and I do want to take a moment because Jason didn't stop me. It's not James Bond.
It's Jason.
Jason Bond.
We wanted to know how long it was going to take you to realize.
I was going to let you call me James for about 2/3 of the episode.
Go back and cut that, Jimbo. Just cut everything else out up until I started talking about that, and we'll be okay.
How about until you just started talking?
You really think that's the first time I've ever been called James Bond?
That's why I just call him Bond.
It's so much easier.
Just call him Bond.
You know how many times I've heard Mr. Anderson? And I'm
exactly.
And then I hear, my name is Neil. I'm like, I've never watched The Matrix, so I have no clue what you're talking about.
Well, you know how many times they call me the Winter Soldier and Bucky because I have the same name as the Winter Soldier?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Exactly, Dustin, you wouldn't know. But anyway, on today's episode, it's going to take us all the way back to the summer of 1972. I don't even know if Bond was born yet. I'm sure he was.
I was just an infant.
When a failed bank robbery in Brooklyn spiraled into one of the most unusual hostage situations the country has ever seen. At the center of the chaos was John Wojtowicz. Now, he was a Polish man, but his last name is spelled Wojtowicz. So Wicz. So we had to get our teacher Bond to give us the correct pronunciation because this is like, I don't know how to spell it. Or say
What's his name? John Fred.
And
so we're going to call him Fred.
So Bond, so I was like, hey, Bond, we need your help. How do you pronounce this? And he goes, or I didn't even tell him that. I sent him the notes and stuff. And he's like, I got two questions. One, I forget the first one. Then the second one's like,
Oh yeah, one. I was like, one, are we just ad-libbing this thing, or are we going with the notes? And two, how do you pronounce Wojtowicz?
I was like, man, coming from our teacher, that's pretty funny. So he actually did his homework, and it is Wojtowicz. But he was a Vietnam veteran whose desperate attempt to help the person he loved would end in tragedy, national headlines, and eventually one of the most famous crime movies ever made. But when we get there, I'll tell you, I had never seen this movie until Bond made me watch it.
Top 5 crime movies.
No, I can think of a handful. Maybe at the time,
it was a decent movie.
It wasn't bad.
It's for those who haven't watched it yet, just imagine the Breakfast Club inside of a bank.
But we'll talk about that on the Tragedy of Cinema, Dustin.
Oh, it's not even the top 10, man. I don't even know where I
But the real events behind Dog Day Afternoon are more complicated and far more human than most people realize. This is the story of desperation, love, chaos, and a robbery that was supposed to last 10 minutes. Instead, it became a moment frozen in American crime history. Looking back today, the Brooklyn bank robbery of 1972 feels almost surreal.
So what became as a poorly planned attempt to steal money quickly turned into a massive public spectacle. Thousands of people crowded the streets watching the drama unfold as if it was some type of strange, theater or play. Like it was surreal. At the center of it all was John, what do you say, Wojtowicz?
No, I'm gonna let you try to say it.
Wojtowicz.
So John, he's a man who didn't really fit the typical image of a criminal mastermind. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't driven by ambition. Instead, his actions were fueled out of desperation and love and a belief that one reckless decision could somehow dig him out of the problems that he was in and kind of fix everything. But it didn't. By the time the ordeal ended at JFK Airport, a young accomplice named Salvatore, I'm going to call him Natural because that's Natural E.
Natural.
We'll just call him Suave. Was dead, and John was in handcuffs. A bizarre chapter, definitely, in American crime. The story didn't really disappear, though. I mean, it became a movie and kind of become its own thing.
I totally agree. I think this was a great idea. I don't know where it went wrong. I guess we'll have to figure that out. You see, because instead it lived on through headlines, documentaries, and eventually the film Dog Day Afternoon, where audience watched a dramatized version of the events play out on the screen. Yet even decades later, the real story remains just as compelling. Because behind the spectacle and the chaos were real people, complicated relationships, to say the least, and a desperate decision that spiraled far beyond anyone's control. Sometimes the truth behind the crime is stranger than the movie it inspires.
So let's go.
He's pretty good. Like, I may have to have him dub my voiceover.
Oh, Bond. That's his teacher. All his work as a teacher.
Right.
That was pretty good. That was probably the best read paragraph in Dark Discovery's history. It's his first one in one take. We got some good ones, but it took like 3 weeks to get.
So let me ask you. Well, we'll talk about that here in a minute. I'm sure we'll see if it covers in the note. Well, I'm just talking about the guy that comes to the bank with him, then ends up leaving. He's like, I can't do this. I don't know if he was a real character in real life yet, so we'll get there. But I was thinking if he would have got charged with anything, like an accomplice after the fact.
Definitely in today's standard, it's conspiracy.
Right.
Conspiracy to commit armed robbery.
But I don't know
he could probably plea out. He'd be charged with something, but he'd probably get to plea out.
He'd probably for his testimony against the other two, probably.
Yeah, and the fact that he probably was the one that, because everything, as you're going to find out, really went sideways really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming when he left, he said something to somebody that seen something or called something. It has to be because, just by the movie, it was very quickly went from a bad planned robbery, like no planning, I swear, into what it became.
Yeah. So let's talk about the beginning of that day. So on a brutally hot afternoon in the summer of 1972, the streets of Brooklyn shimmered beneath the heavy August heat. It was the kind of day New Yorkers knew well. Thick humidity hanging in the air, tempers short, and the city moving at that slow, exhausted pace that only comes with late summer. Inside a quiet neighborhood branch of Chase Manhattan Bank, employees was going about the ordinary routine of a weekday afternoon. The lunch rush had long passed, and the day was winding down towards its usual uneventful close. Shortly after 3 p.m., 3 young men approached the entrance of the bank. To anyone watching, they looked unremarkable. They were dressed casually and moved with a slightly nervous energy of people trying hard to appear normal. But beneath that calm exterior, each of them knew they were about to commit a crime that could change their lives forever. Their plan was simple, almost unbelievably simple. Walk into a bank, pull their weapons, demand the money, and get out before anyone had time to react. If everything went right, they would be gone within 10 minutes. No violence, no complications, just a quick robbery and a fast escape. But before the plan even truly began, everything started to unravel.
As the 3 men entered the bank, one of them suddenly lost the nerve. Whether it was fear, second thoughts, or the overwhelming realization what they were about to do, something broke inside of him. Without warning, he turned around and ran out the door, abandoning the robbery entirely. Inside the bank, the 2 remaining men stood there for a moment as the reality of the situation hit them like a ton of bricks. Their carefully planned heist had already fallen apart. It wasn't carefully planned, but their planned heist was crumbling, and they were committed to something they could no longer control. And outside, somebody had already called the police. Within minutes, sirens began echoing through the streets of Brooklyn. Patrol cars arrived and surrounded the building. Officers took position behind their vehicles, weapons drawn, trying to assess what kind of situation they were really dealing with. Inside the bank, the employees and the customers slowly realized something terrifying. They were no longer simply witnessing a robbery. They had just become hostages. What had been intended as a quick 10-minute crime was now transforming into something far more dangerous. As the minutes passed, more police arrived. The streets were blocked off. Curious onlookers began to gather behind barricades. Long before the TV crew showed up, their cameras would capture everything as it unfolded.
Okay, so
watching the movie, it was pretty impressive. And I'm sure this is how it went on in real life. They just was like, hey, stay behind the barrier. And these guys with these big old clunky TV cameras.
That was great, man.
They don't give a shit. They're going in to get this picture. Like, we're going to break we don't care.
It makes me wonder, like, how long did they plan this thing? Did they sit there with plans? They all sat together. Here's your job. Here's my job. And then we're going to walk in. You get the bank guard. You take care of all the bank tellers. I'll get the money. And the second they walk in, one guy's like, I quit. You can't quit mid-robbery.
But I think that, I bet it was pretty much planned out. I bet they did have a real strategic plan. But the problem is they didn't count on somebody backing out. When that happens, chaos just ensued.
It's like boxing. Everybody has a plan on what they're going to do until they get punched in the nose. And once you get punched in the nose and your eyes start to water, the adrenaline or the fear starts to take over. And I think that plan, it just slipped away.
I think you're right, man. It's like, the idea of holding a gun to somebody's head and saying, okay, you put a gun to this guy's head while I get the money. But when reality sets in and you got to pull a gun and point it at somebody, right away whether or not that is somebody who, are you that kind of person or are you not?
And I don't think John,
that guy realized right then, boom, he's not that kind of person.
Yeah, I don't think he was.
Well, get this, guys. Over the next several hours, the strange and chaotic scene outside the bank would grow into a full-scale spectacle watched by people all across the country. Thousands of spectators filled the streets. Reporters broadcast live updates. Negotiators attempted to reason with the men inside. By the time the ordeal was over, one man would be dead, another would be taken away in handcuffs, and the bizarre robbery would become one of the most famous hostage crises in American history. At the center of all this was a man named John Wojtowicz. I can't say it, Wojtowicz. He had been born on March 9th. I know. He was born March 9th, 1945 in New York City, growing up working-class Brooklyn neighborhood during the decades following World War II. His upbringing reflected the immigrant culture that defined much of New York at the time. His father was Polish-American. His mother was from an Italian family. Like many families in the city, they worked hard to build a stable life in an environment that could be both exciting and unforgiving. From an early age, people noticed that Wojtowicz had a personality that was difficult to ignore. He was loud, energetic, and often charismatic. Friends later described him as someone who loved being the center of attention, someone who could easily charm the people around him. But that same personality also came with a reckless streak. He was impulsive, emotional, and prone to making decisions without fully thinking through the consequences.
I mean, we've been there. Who's ever ordered something without thinking of the consequences to eat, right?
Man.
What's funny is we only see the second half of his personality. We didn't see the charismatic, which I think the movie kind of leaned into that a little bit, that because you can kind of see it. You don't get to see it, unless you go find, some new stuff from back in the day. He did enough, I think, to win the people over with him, but I don't think it showed kind of that charismatic and that energetic person. You just seen that impulsive, that side of him.
So as a young man, Wojtowicz joined the United States Army and eventually served during the Vietnam War. When he returned home from military service, he faced the same challenges that many veterans of that era experienced. The country he came back to was deeply divided over the war, and many soldiers struggled to find their place in civilian life again. For Wojtowicz, the transition proved especially difficult. He struggled to maintain steady employment and often bounced between jobs, never quite finding financial stability. Money problems became a constant part of his life, but it was not just his financial situation that was complicated. His personal life would ultimately play an even larger role in the crime that made him infamous. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, New York City was undergoing major cultural shifts. The LGBTQ community was slowly beginning to assert itself more openly, particularly after the historic Stonewall riots in 1969. But despite those changes, society remained largely hostile towards people who did not fit traditional expectations, and many individuals within that community lived their lives in secrecy. Wojtowicz had previously been married to a woman, but his romantic life did not fit neatly into conventional labels. While spending time in New York's underground nightlife scene, he eventually met someone who would become the most important person in his life.
Her name was Elizabeth Eden. Eden was born to Ernest Aaron.
Aaron
has two A's though. So
it's not AA, Ron.
I'm confused. I always see AA Ron, and I don't know. I'm lost. But
Bond, would you like to give the correct pronunciation to that one?
I would say Aaron.
Yeah, it goes against.
It's
like
just a different spelling.
It's like if you spell Dustin with an E, that's just sacrilege.
It's still Dustin. Yeah.
But Ernest was a transgender woman trying to survive in a world that offered very little acceptance or support for people like her. The medical procedure she hoped to undergo, the gender-affirming surgery, they were rare, controversial, and extremely expensive in the early 1970s. For someone living with limited financial resources, the possibility of affording such a procedure seemed almost impossible. So the movie says about $2,500, I think is what it was for this surgery. You could buy a car for less money than that at this time, I think. I think a Ford Pinto in 1980 was $2,500.
It's not the price that caught me on this one. It's the gender reassignment surgery circa 1972. I know there's medical advancements and all, but how rough of a surgery was that in 72?
So let's say you had ED in the 70s. There's a mobster that had something implanted that would basically fill with warm water, and that's how they treated it in the 70s. So it's a weird time in medicine. We're not nearly as advanced as we are now. And, you know, I'm listening to some stuff and researching some of these mobsters, and it's like, I find that not hilarious that he had ED because we're all men and at some point that happens. But the fact, the way that they were treating it with like a switch to shove warm water in to make it work. Just
that's what I'm saying. This has to be a pretty primitive surgery.
Yeah. And if that's what they were doing for ED, I'd hate to see what they're going to do.
To change you into a woman?
Yes. I would be surprised if 1 in 5 people didn't make it off the table at that point.
It's got to be dangerous, man.
Absolutely. Eden had struggled with severe emotional pain and periods of deep depression. At one point, she attempted suicide and was hospitalized. The situation was devastating to John. I can't even, not going to try it. He believed that if he could somehow help her obtain the surgery that she wanted, it might give her a chance at happiness and stability. But as we all know, the elephant in the room on this is money. The surgery cost, it says $1,000. I think they were talking like $1,000, $1,500. Far more than he could ever realistically earn through the job he had been working. Saving that money seemed impossible. And the pressure of watching somebody he loved suffer emotionally was just a heavy weight on him that he couldn't bear. I mean, imagine your loved one watching them in pain, whether it's physical, mental, you know, it's heartbreaking. My daughter just got her wisdom teeth cut out, and to see her mope around before the pain, it just breaks your heart. You wish you could take that pain from them, but you can't. So what do you do when you love somebody? You find a solution.
Hey, man, that's a perfect idea, because somewhere in that mixture of love, desperation, impulsive thinking, John Wojtowicz convinced himself there's only one way to solve this problem. He's going to rob a bank. In his mind, the plan seemed pretty simple. He'd gather a couple of accomplices, walk into a bank, take the money, and disappear before the police could even stop them. The entire thing would only take a few minutes. And afterwards, he'd finally have the money needed to help the woman that he loved. But the robbery he imagined would last 10 minutes. Well, that's going to spiral into a 14-hour hostage crisis that the entire nation would get to see unfold in real time.
So my first question, though, why would you rob a bank in the middle? Like, I guess the idea is Brooklyn's so busy. We're going to sneak in, sneak out, blend in, get away. They're never going to know it was us. I would have been looking for a remote place. I wouldn't have went somewhere in town because, you know, there's a lot of police in New York City in the 70s. There's a lot of corruption, but I would want to go someplace to where you could kind of watch yourself better and not get.
Well, do you know why they probably did that though, Dustin? Let's think about it. Like you said, Brooklyn's pretty busy. What's also in Brooklyn? A lot of businesses.
Yeah.
So they're probably probably have their deposits from the night before, maybe even some in the afternoon. So all these businesses have came in and dropped off their deposits. So there's probably a lot of money at this bank at the time, or at least that's what they thought, you know, closing.
That's the idea. I get it, but it's, you know.
But if you go somewhere remotely and they don't have enough money on hand to cover what you need, I can see that point too.
But there is, I don't know how deep we're going to go in this right now, but there was some mob ties to this. And it's one of those that you would think if you're a known associate that they probably wouldn't report you. So I don't know if that's some thinking or if it's just pure.
I'm also thinking it's just easier to case a neighborhood bank compared to, like, if you go to some small town and you start hanging out and like staring at their bank for a while, it's gonna draw suspicion.
Yeah, it raises attention. A lot of red flags where this is
I mean, millions of people that
walking
live
by
in
every
Brooklyn,
day.
you know, nobody's going to notice you.
Exactly.
So let's talk about their plan that fell apart. So, of course, by the summer of 72, Wojtowicz had convinced himself that robbing a bank was only the realistic way to get money. I mean, not go get a second job, right?
Well, you got to remember too, like how old were you in 1972, Jimbo?
-5.
So you were -5. So I don't know what the minimum wage was back in 1972, and I'm guessing only $2 or $3 an hour.
Bond would know.
I didn't have a job. I was a baby.
So the cost of the surgery that Elizabeth Eden hoped to undergo was far beyond anything he could earn through normal work, and the desperation he felt pushed him towards a reckless decision. But even
$1.60 an hour was the minimum wage in 1972 in New York City.
But even as he began forming the plan, there was very little about it that could truly be described as organized, as we've talked about. So Wojtowicz was not a career criminal, nor was he part of a sophisticated robbery crew. Instead, the people he turned to were young men he knew from his social circle in Brooklyn. The two who ultimately agreed to help him were Salvatore Naturel, a quiet and somewhat reserved teenager who was only 18 years old, and another acquaintance named Robert Westenberg. So the plan itself, it was simple. It was almost dangerously simple. They would target a neighborhood branch of Chase Manhattan Bank in Brooklyn. The assumption was that the bank would be holding a large amount of cash, enough for them to walk away with tens of thousands of dollars. Once they had the money, they would leave quickly and disappear before police had time to respond. There was no elaborate escape routes. There was no deep understanding of security systems or police response times. Much of the planning seemed to rely on little more than confidence and the hope that things would go smoothly. Later, investigators would point out just how poorly thought out the robbery had been going from the beginning.
And you remember, criminals don't always think things through the best, so just keep that in mind. So the afternoon in question, August 22nd, 1972, we've made it clear that the three men made their way into the bank and put their plan into motion. As they approached the building, the weight of what they were about to do began to settle over the crew. For some people, the reality of committing a crime becomes overwhelming at that final moment, as it appears to have been exactly what happened with one of the robbers in this one. As the men stepped into the bank, Robert Westenberg suddenly lost his nerve. Whether it was the fear of being caught, the consequences, or simply the last-minute realization that maybe this isn't what I should be doing, whatever it was, something stopped him, and he without warning turned around and walked straight back out the door, leaving two men to carry out this robbery. For a brief moment, the plan hung in balance. Now there were only two men in the bank, and when Wojtowicz and Naturel, at that point, they had a choice. They could abandon the robbery entirely and walk away before anybody realized what was going on, or they could continue. And continue is what they did. So when Wojtowicz pulled out his weapon and announced, "Hey, this is a stick-up," he ordered everyone in the bank to stay calm and cooperate. Employees and customers immediately froze as the reality of the situation set in. The room had been filled with the normal sounds of the ordinary workday, and it suddenly became quiet and tense.
Man, you always have to be extra careful about who you pick as your robbing buddies. You always have to be careful with that. Man, you can't, are you going to chicken out? Are you going to go running like 2 seconds into it?
And you're going to rat on them. Like how do you keep three people to keep a secret?
Oh man, only if two others are dead. You know that.
Exactly.
But almost immediately, the robbery encountered another major problem. You see, the bank simply didn't have that much money left. It was late in the afternoon. Most of the day's cash had already been moved or secured. When the robbers forced employees to open the vault, they discovered that there was nowhere near the amount of money that they expected. Instead of about a massive payday, they found only about $29,000.
That's still
was a
pretty good.
Well, that's $29,000, 1972 money. That's a pretty good amount, I think.
I'm getting back to my math again, so hold on. So if they made $1.60 an hour, we're going to take that times 80 hours, times that by 52 or 26 weeks of the year. That can't be right. Let me make sure my math is mathing.
Now you just do $1. What was it? $1.60 an hour?
Yeah, just say $2 an hour for 40 hours a week.
Well, you
That's
just do it times
$328 before taxes and all that stuff.
Yeah, you just multiply it times 2,048 or 2,040 even. That's what you get.
That's
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's like 10 years worth of working.
Yeah, that's not a horrible payday, but it's not let's go buy an island money.
Are you splitting it 3 ways? Are you splitting it 2 ways now because that one guy took off?
I guess you probably throw him like that. Whatever the change is. You keep
29,000. So he gets 1,000. You split the other 28.
Yeah, you keep it easy. That's what I do. Like, here's a little bit for chickening out, you wuss.
Because his face is still in the cameras. His face is still on the bank cameras.
I like how in the movie they just spray paint over it, not like let's go in and get the tape out and destroy the tape. Let's just paint the cameras.
Oh, yeah, man. It was a devastating realization. The robbery they had risked everything for was already a failure. Even worse, the situation outside the bank was rapidly escalating. Someone had managed to alert authorities, and within minutes, police cars began arriving on the scene. Sirens echoed through the streets of Brooklyn. Officers quickly surrounded the building. Inside the bank, the tensions rose as the robbers realized they were running out of options. Their plan to enter quickly and leave unnoticed had completely collapsed. Now police were outside, the building was surrounded, and there was no clear escape route. At that moment, the robbery transformed into something far more serious. Instead of simply stealing money and leaving, Wojtowicz and Naturel now found themselves trapped inside a bank with employees and customers who suddenly now became hostages. The two men moved quickly to control the situation, ordering everyone, remain calm, stay where you are.
I have a question. Do you think if that third guy would have stayed, they would have pulled this off successfully?
No.
No.
All right.
Because
I like how he walks in with the box of flowers or whatever, the big long box that's holding a shotgun.
I'm like, gee, I wonder what's in that. Yeah. It's not flour. Like, how obvious. And I think that just is to show you how much the hustle and bustle of the city is.
But that was in the movie. I don't know if it was in this. Yeah. So
if you really walked in with a big box of roses.
Yeah. Who's the lucky girl or guy?
And if you're next to like a flower store or something, it's plausible that somebody could come in, but it's like, for me, I'm like, that's a red flag right off the bat.
Right.
So when the first guy leaves, do you continue robbing this bank or do you go, sorry, thank you for your time, and then you walk out with him? Yeah. Do you continue robbing this bank?
Probably not. I would probably just tuck tail and run.
But weren't they too far into the robbery to just turn around and leave, though? Hadn't he already demanded that everybody, this is a robbery and all that, and then the guy leaves?
They were pretty deep into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think...
It was guns drawn. They had the bank manager off to the side, to say, this is a robbery. They had gathered up all of the bank tellers together. But realistically, I'm like, okay, guys, thanks. And then I would just leave.
Do not look at the man with this giant flower box. Do not look at the man behind.
You are getting sleepy. You will forget everything that you have been seeing. But Bond had talked about what was happening on the inside. Let's talk about what was happening on the outside. So on the outside, police officers took positions around the bank and the buildings and attempted to determine exactly what they were dealing with. At first, the situation was unclear. They had no clue what was going on. Reports came in that armed men were inside the bank, but details were still emerging. As word spread throughout the neighborhood, curious residents began gathering nearby. People watched from sidewalks and windows as police blocked off streets and established a perimeter around the bank. Within a short time, the crowd outside began to grow. Then the media arrived. Television news crews rushed to the scene, setting up cameras and broadcasting live updates as the story developed. What had begun as a small neighborhood crime was quickly turning into something much larger. The strange bank robbery was unfolding in real time, and the entire city seemed to be watching. Meanwhile, inside the bank, the situation had become a strange mixture of fear, confusion, and unexpected calm. Hostages later recalled that despite the tension, John Wojtowicz often spoke to them in a surprisingly casual manner, and at times he even joked with them or tried to reassure them that no one would be hurt if they all cooperated.
I would have loved to watch that, man. I would have just loved to see this go down. If I was, older in 1972, imagine turning on your television set and they're all like, we interrupt this program to bring you a bank robbery live.
And then you look
so
out
exciting.
Your apartment window that's over a shop and the whole block is full of people.
I didn't know we had a block party scheduled for today.
I would have yelled out the window, hey, keep those sirens down. I'm watching television here. There's a bank robbery.
I'm listening to Dark Discoveries. Turn it down.
Turn it down.
I was going to say like Unsolved Mysteries or something good. Like,
hey, I'm watching TV here.
Hey, I'm watching Archie Bunker here. I think that was on in 72, right?
I don't know.
I get canceled now because I mentioned Archie Bunker, so I'm sorry. So as the hours passed on that afternoon, the strange situation unfolding at the Chase Bank in Manhattan, Manhattan Bank in Brooklyn, that's too many different towns in one area, continued to grow larger and more chaotic. What started as a failed robbery was now something totally different. A full-scale hostage crisis with dozens of police officers surrounding the building. A growing crowd of spectators were gathering behind the barricades. And inside the bank, John Wojtowicz and Salvatore Naturel. I think that's a tag team, ain't it?
It is.
Coming from Brooklyn, New York, weighing a combined 275 pounds. The Italians.
They're really small for wrestlers. Combined 275.
I'm guessing they were pretty small. We could go,
385.
650 pounds. They were inside, they were trying to maintain control of the situation. This was not something they really planned for in their little robbery. The original robbery had been intended to last, like we said, only a couple of minutes, but now hours were getting to pass. Police negotiators had arrived and were attempting to communicate with the men inside, hoping that the situation would defuse without violence. However, the atmosphere was becoming almost surreal. News of the hostage situation quickly spread through the neighborhood, and before long, people from all over Brooklyn began lining up behind the barriers and watching to see what was going to happen. Families stood behind police lines. People leaned out of apartment windows and crowded onto the nearby rooftops to get a better view. The streets were filled with spectators eager to witness whatever would happen next. So I lived in some apartments that weren't bad, but they had somebody who I think murdered their boyfriend's ex-boyfriend and had him in the closet, and they brought out the SWAT team, and people were like lining, like everybody that lived in the apartment complex, which I could see from my window, were all gathering around, like looking, and they had like a sniper. I'm like, I'm good. I'm not getting close. Like, I don't want to die or get shot over this. But people, they see that train wreck, that car crash, they're going to stop and they're going to nib. They're going to see what's going on. I don't get that, but that is.
Yeah, people can't help but look, man. You can't help but check it out. What's going on? Man, television crews, they arrived quickly. News vans lined the streets, reporters speaking into microphones, cameras rolled. Now, in the early 1970s, live television coverage was unfolding of crimes. Oh, that's still relatively new. And the bizarre situation at the bank quickly became a media spectacle. Inside the building, the robbers were well aware of the growing attention outside. Through the windows, they could see the flashing lights of police vehicles and the mass of people gathering in the streets. At several points during the negotiation, Wojtowicz even stepped outside of the bank to speak directly with police officers and negotiators.
I think that's where it started to go downhill. Like
Yeah.
it was gutsy, but it's like they know that you're not gonna probably hurt anybody. Like they're feeling you out, and it just, I guess that's where he became more charismatic outside. That I kind of said he wasn't, but it was just,
It's probably all those cameras and all those people watching. Now he had an audience.
yeah, it's time to perform.
Yeah. Now, during one of these moments, something unexpected happened, guys. Standing outside the bank, surrounded by police, watched by thousands of people in the streets, Wojtowicz suddenly began shouting toward the crowd, "Attica! Attica! Attica!" The chant was direct reference to the Attica prison riot, which had taken place less than a year earlier in September of 1971. The riot at the Attica Corrections Facility had become one of the most controversial events in modern American history, ending with a violent police assault that left dozens of inmates and hostages dead. For many people, the name Attica had come to symbolize government violence and the brutal treatment of prisoners. When Wojtowicz shouted the word, he was attempting to portray himself as someone standing up to police authority. It was a dramatic gesture, and it had an immediate effect on the crowd. People began cheering.
Some spectators
That
clapped.
amazes me.
What?
That just amazes me. Like all of a sudden, let's get you just connect into something that happened in recent history, and all of a sudden these people are eating out of the palm of his hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's you know why? It's because you know what happened at that prison riot, right?
I don't. So that's something I think I'm going to have to go down some rabbit holes on.
Well, let's just say the police may or may not have killed a few extra people. So maybe we'll have to cover that on the Dark Discoveries episode. I think that'd be a good one.
That's up our alley.
Yep. So some spectators clapped and shouted back in support, treating the moment almost like a performance rather than a life or death crisis. The bizarre mixture of tension and spectacle only added to the surreal nature of the entire event. What should have been a terrifying hostage situation had begun to resemble something closer to a public drama unfolding on the streets of Brooklyn. Inside the bank, the atmosphere had also taken on an oddly strange tone. Hostages later recalled that while the situation was undeniably frightening, there were also moments of surprising calm. Wojtowicz, in particular, seemed to swing between nervous agitation and almost casual friendliness. He spoke with hostages, joked with them at times, and repeatedly insisted that no one would be harmed as long as everyone cooperated. At one point, the situation became so strangely relaxed that food was actually ordered for the people inside the bank. Pizza was brought in, and both the hostages and the robbers ate together while negotiations continued. The image of a bank robbery turned into a shared pizza dinner only reinforced how unusual the entire situation had become. Meanwhile, the police negotiators continued trying to learn more about the motivations behind the crime. During these conversations, the true reason for the robbery slowly began to emerge.
Has Chicago deep dish pizza ever been sent in to diffuse tension in a...
I'm probably going to say it was probably Little Caesars because they weren't going to spend a lot on her.
No, it's
Hey,
New York, man.
this is New York City. There ain't sending no Chicago deep dish.
Like deep dish is going to sit heavy. Like
It'll be
you
New
need
York
nice,
style, Dustin,
like,
not deep dish.
New York- that's what
Chicago
I'm
deep
saying.
dish.
Has Chicago pizza? That was my question. Has Chicago deep dish pizza ever defused a hostage situation? I don't think so.
So why didn't they just put some sort of like sleeping pills or something like that in the pizza?
Well, they allude to that in the movie, remember? Like,
Yeah,
oh, it's going to be
because
poison.
No, he's diabetic, you idiot. And it's funny because in the movie they're drinking Tab.
Yeah,
I thought only Alf drank Tab.
I like Tab.
I maybe bought some and I realized how bad it was.
It's really bad. My grandma, it was between that and Diet Right when you went to her house. So pick your poison.
I couldn't figure it out. My grandma drank diet caffeine-free Coke. And I'm like, what's the point of drinking Coke if you're not going to have the sugar or the caffeine? You're just drinking fizzy. Like, you might as well drink Pepsi at that point because it sucks. Huh?
My grandpa drank mostly beer.
My other grandpa drank beer. That's what got him. I remember seeing, I swear this is true, that he was on the riding lawnmower with like 16-ounce tall boys double fisting them, cutting the grass. I wish my grandma drank beer. Like, my grandma was a good woman, though. All right. So Wojtowicz explained that the robbery had not been motivated by greed or desire for a lavish lifestyle. But like we said, and this is where I think the people started to feel for him inside of the bank, that he was committing this crime in order to raise money for somebody he loved. Like we covered, that person was Elizabeth Eden. As the negotiations continue, police learned that Eden had been struggling with severe emotional distress and had previously attempted suicide. The surgery she wanted was expensive, and Wojtowicz believed that if he could somehow obtain the money, it may give her a chance at a better life. For the negotiators outside, that revelation added a complicated and emotional dimension to the situation. The robbery was no longer about simply money. It was tied to a deeply personal story of love, depression, and mental health struggles. But the tension inside the bank had not totally disappeared. As the evening approached, everybody involved knew that the standoff could not last forever. Police were under enormous pressure to resolve this crisis without anybody getting hurt. Like we said, and the fact that he's bringing up Attica is probably being picked up on the news because these cameras are rolling. I'm sure the moment they got on location, they probably didn't stop filming until they were done. So now you're getting all this stuff where you're bringing that back up, and that's going to probably intensify the crowd's reaction and their emotional connection with all this. So the longer the situation continued, the greater the risk that something could go wrong. The negotiators began discussing possible ways for the robbers to surrender safely.
Yeah, I like that. It was like, hey, if you give me pizza, then you got to give me 3 hostages.
One for each topping.
If you want something to drink, it's going to cost you a hostage. You know what I'm saying? I was like, what?
What a master negotiator, though.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Priceline negotiator.
That was nice.
I need to
This episode brought to you by Priceline. Now, Wojtowicz proposed something a little bit more dramatic. He demanded the transportation to the airport and a plane that would allow him and Naturel to leave the country. It was a bold demand, but in hostage situations, negotiators often pretend to consider such request in order to buy time and keep the suspects calm. After hours of negotiation, an arrangement began to take shape. A limousine would arrive to transport the robbers and the hostages to JFK International Airport. There, a plane would supposedly be waiting to take them out of the country. A perfect plan once again. Inside the bank, it must have sounded like a possible escape. But outside, law enforcement had already begun preparing for the final act of this standoff. Agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation were on their way to the airport, quietly planning how the ordeal would end. After nearly 14 hours of chaos, the bizarre hostage crisis in Brooklyn was about to reach its final and most dangerous moment. When the limousine carrying the robbers and hostages finally arrived at the airport, everything would end in a matter of seconds.
What kind of idiot thinks that they're going to be able to demand a helicopter, but settle for a bus or whatever you want to call it and make it to the airport? Actually think they're going to let you get on an airplane? Like, where do you think that?
It's 14 hours of negotiation. After 14 hours, everything starts to sound like it's a possibility.
Is fatigue going into where you start to give in?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because you have to realize, I can't win. There's no solution where I just live in this bank for the rest of my life.
No.
I have to get out of here. They're not going to just let me walk away. So at some point, this plan sounds like it could really, really happen.
Do you think they should have took their shot when he walked outside and started shouting Attica, Attica, or do you think that was too much in view of the public to do something like that?
I think because of Attica, they couldn't take the shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he didn't, he was just out there, and it's like they can't just shoot him in the head right there, because
they could have.
That would have caused a riot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm sure the police were far outnumbered at this point. But when you do that, when you decide that you're going to take that shot and there's another person inside with a gun, are they going to just go ahead and kill everybody in there?
Well, according to the movie, Sal was like a Vietnam crazy guy that would just kill anything if anything went wrong, right? And even here we find out he's only an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, it's...
So let's start going down the final confrontation. So by the time night had fully fallen over Brooklyn, the bizarre hostage crisis inside the Chase Manhattan Bank had stretched on for nearly 14 exhausting hours. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I could go 14 hours without going to the bathroom. Especially eating after pizza, man. If I had as much pizza as me and Dustin eat, if we go to Arnie's and we pack away some pizza, we're going to the bathroom at some point.
You know what follows pizza, right? A bowel movement.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, this puts it about, 5 o'clock in the morning at this point? Because they walk into the bank at like 3:30, right? So if you add 15 hours or 14 hours to that, it's like 4 or 5 in the morning now.
I think, like you said, fatigue and being tired, it's going to probably start. And the stress, the
adrenaline and stress.
So you being a teacher, you get to where every 45, 50 minutes, you get a little bit of a break. The kids leave. You have a couple minutes to kind of re-energize yourself. But when you're in front of people and just like eye contact, if you're in that room full of people, that can be mentally exhausting, teaching those kids, because you're constantly making eye contact and communicating, talking and working through things. And it seems like that eye contact drains you.
Yeah, you have to be on 7 to 8 hours a day nonstop.
Yeah. It can be mental, and it sounds kind of funny, but it can be mentally draining. And the fact that you're trying to keep these people on your side because you guys are outnumbered. If somebody decided to be a hero, which it's all women, but if somebody wanted to be a hero, it probably wouldn't have been that hard. And to keep that mental sharpness and clarity when you were probably up early, you're not going to wake up at 10 o'clock and roll to bed, 11 o'clock and hit this bank at 3. You're up probably all day thinking through your plan, running through your final thing. So you're getting close to, maybe close to 24 hours of being up.
Also think about whenever the police takes a suspect in for questioning, and you always hear about those stories of them questioning these people in this little room for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. And next thing you know, they're confessing to murdering people they never even met.
Yeah, you killed JFK, because you're just so mentally drained because they've got you in there. They're
drilling you constantly.
Yeah, they're on you constantly, and you're trying to stay focused. And at some point, that sharpness starts to fall off.
So I think that's what happens here. They're like, you know what? We're going to get you that plane. We're going to get a limo. We're going to pick you up. We're going to take you to the airport, and we'll get you out of here, man. Let's just end this.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, yeah, let's just do it.
Well, because he's been promised to give the hostages back once they get on the plane, right?
Yeah, once they get on the plane, the hostages can go free.
Yeah, because the police have never let them.
Right. So what had begun as a botched robbery during the afternoon had now turned into a tense waiting game between the robbers, the hostages, and the hundreds of law enforcement officers surrounding the building. Inside the bank, fatigue was beginning to set in. The hostages had been trapped for hours, unsure how the situation would end. Police negotiators continued speaking with John Wojtowicz, attempting to keep him calm and prevent any sudden violence. But everyone involved understood that the standoff could not continue forever. Wojtowicz had made his demands clear. He wanted safe passage out of the city. Specifically, he demanded transportation to John F. Kennedy International Airport, where a plane would supposedly be waiting to take him and Salvatore Naturel out of the country. The hostages, he insisted, would travel with them to guarantee their safety. In hostage negotiations, law enforcement often appears to cooperate with demands in order to buy time and create an opportunity to resolve the situation safely. In this case, negotiators agreed to the plan.
So before I get on my part again, I just want to share my favorite part of the movie, and I hope this part was real when he's on the phone and he's like, you did it with him? This isn't going to end good. He's like, yeah, tell me. He wants to go to Wyoming.
Yeah, he doesn't know it's another country.
Yeah. Like
That
I
was great.
hope that was real because that was the best part of the movie. So the limousine was arranged to transport the robbers and the hostages to John Fitzgerald Kennedy International Airport. Shortly after midnight, the vehicle finally arrived outside the bank. Police officers carefully positioned themselves around the area of the doors. The doors would open. The long standoff inside the building had begun to move towards its conclusion. One by one, the hostages were brought out of the bank and escorted into the limousine along with Wojtowicz and Naturel. For the people watching from the streets and their televisions at home, the scene was surreal. The robbers who had spent hours at the center of this massive standoff were now calmly climbing into a car with their hostages, apparently being allowed to leave free. So they thought. But what they didn't know was the final stage of this operation had already been set into motion. Agents at the FBI were waiting at the airport. As the limo traveled through the quiet nighttime streets toward JFK International, tensions inside the vehicle was thick. The hostages had no way of knowing what would happen once they arrived. Wojtowicz and Naturel believed they were being taken to a plane that would allow them to escape and leave the country. But the authorities had no intentions of letting them leave. When the limousine finally pulled into on the tarmac at the airport, the plane that had been promised was sitting there waiting under floodlights. To anyone inside the vehicle, it looked exactly like the escape they had been negotiating for.
Yeah, let's go to the plane that's highlighted with spotlights.
Do they usually put spotlights around your plane before they take off?
I don't know, but it's like, oh yeah, let's go to this plane.
Now, what they could not see clearly in the darkness was the armed agents positioned nearby. As the passengers began to exit the limousine, the situation exploded into action. An FBI agent suddenly moved toward the vehicle and pressed a gun against Salvador Naturel. In the span of a single second, the agent fired a shot directly into Naturel's head. The young accomplice collapsed instantly, killed on the spot. The sudden violence shocked everyone present. The 14-hour standoff that had captivated the nation was over almost as quickly as it begun. The entire confrontation at the airport lasted only seconds. John Wojtowicz, stunned by what had just happened, realized immediately that there was no escape. Surrounded by armed agents and police officers, he surrendered without firing a shot. Inside the limousine, the hostages were quickly pulled to safety as law enforcement secured the scene. For thousands of people who had spent the day watching the strange hostage crisis unfold, the ending was sudden and tragic. The robbery that had begun as a desperate attempt to steal money had now left one man dead and another in police custody.
The young accomplice who had joined the robbery that afternoon, Salvatore Naturel, was only 18 years old. And the man who had orchestrated the entire plan, John Wojtowicz, was now under arrest, facing a future that would be very different from the one he had imagined just hours earlier. But even as the crisis came to an end, the strange story of the Brooklyn bank robbery was far from over. In the days that followed, newspapers across the country would publish detailed accounts of the bizarre hostage drama. The public became fascinated by the strange mixture of crime, spectacle, and personal tragedy that had unfolded over these 14 hours. The story was so unusual, so dramatic, and so filled with strange moments that it quickly caught the attention of journalists and filmmakers alike. Within just a few years, the chaotic events of that summer day in 1972 would be transformed into one of the most famous crime films ever made. That movie was Dog Day Afternoon. But like many films based... Do what?
I only kind of talked that up because that's what we're going to cover next, but it is still not one of the best crime movies ever.
Yes,
made.
it is. Watch the listen to the podcast. It's amazing.
But like many films...
was good, but it wasn't great.
Well, you just save that commentary for when you get on the tragedy, right?
Oh, I will. I'm full of it.
We know this. But like many films based on true events, the version that appeared on screen was not exactly the same as the story that had unfolded in real life.
So kind of some of the aftermath and kind of, how Hollywood takes that truth and kind of bends it to what's entertaining. So when the chaotic events at the JFK International Airport came to an abrupt end in the early morning of August 23rd, 1972, the strange hostage crisis that had gripped New York City was finally over. Salvatore Natural lay dead on the airport's tarmac. A man who had orchestrated the entire robbery, John Wojtowicz, was taken into custody by federal agents. For the hostages who had spent hours trapped inside the bank, the ordeal was finally over. Many of them would later describe the experience as surreal, an event that swung wildly between fear, confusion, and bizarre moments of calmness. Incredibly, most of the hostages survived the ordeal, physically unharmed, something that negotiators and police considered a major success given how volatile the situation had been. But for
Wojtowicz.
John, the reality of what he did was unavoidable. He was charged with bank robbery and hostage taking, a serious federal crime that carried a pretty lengthy prison sentence. I think he got 20 years. The story quickly became national news, appearing on the front pages of newspapers across the country. Journalists were fascinated, not only by the robbery itself, but the unusual personal story behind it. The fact that the crime was committed in the attempt to raise money for Elizabeth Eden to go for a sex change operation, it drew people in. See, I kind of got you. You thought I was going to, maybe we will talk about what's different. I don't know. I don't want to give anything away. Should we, Jimbo?
I don't know.
I don't want to give it away because they won't listen to both of us. And I can't.
No, they got to wait. They got to wait.
I can't make that episode. This episode for Tragedy has to be your number one episode of the year because that's the standard I hold myself to.
No
because
problem with that at all.
I go on your show and your ratings go up.
So what are you trying to say? If I go on your show, the ratings will go
down?
Well, they better go up too. But I think it's just because Jimbo picked such bad movies. I picked.
Whoa. Bond is the great
thanks, Jimbo.
picker of bad movies.
Oh, Jimbo,
he's filling in for Kyle quite nicely.
Oh, well, I'm no Jackie. I can tell you that much right now. So don't expect the ratings to shoot up.
Yeah, because like I said, if we ever go, straight video platform, all she has to do is, wink her eyes, and the guys are going to just line up.
Yeah,
we're going to get YouTube.
Next thing you know, there's a Patreon member.
OnlyFans.
At least it's just a Patreon.
Yeah.
I'll be the first one.
If I get a cut, I don't care what.
You don't care how it happens. All right, so man, here's what happens next, right?
That are talking about going on OnlyFans because they can do whatever they want.
There you go.
And people subscribe, and they're like, we don't care if it's an adult website, as long as people subscribe and give us money. We don't.
Doesn't matter.
Money's money.
Man, facing overwhelming evidence, Wojtowicz eventually agrees to plead guilty. In exchange for his cooperation, prosecutors recommend a reduced sentence. Instead of spending decades in prison, he was ultimately sentenced to 20 years, but he only served about 5 years before being released.
Even after
yeah, that's pretty nice. Even after the trial ended, however, the strange story of the Brooklyn bank robbery continued to attract attention. One of the most important moments in preserving the story came when a journalist wrote a detailed article about the crime for Life magazine. The piece, titled "The Boys in the Bank," explored the bizarre series of events that had unfolded during those 14 hours in Brooklyn and the complicated personal lives behind the robbery. The article captured the public's imagination and quickly caught the attention of Hollywood producers. That's the name of this episode, Jimbo. The Boys in the Bank.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think the Boys in the Hood may be kind of infringed on this.
True. Now, this story seemed almost too unusual to be real. A chaotic bank robbery, massive crowds cheering in the streets, a desperate motive rooted in love and identity, dramatic final confrontation at the airport. It has every element you need for a great and powerful film.
Within a few years, The events of that August day were adapted into the movie Dog Day Afternoon, released in 1975. So you're talking about a quick turnaround from the actual historical event to the movie. I mean, that's what, less than 3 years, maybe 2.5, 3 years?
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That is good.
So it's directed by Sidney Lumet. The film starred Al Pacino as a fictionalized version of Wojtowicz named Sonny Wojtowicz. Actor John Cazale portrayed Sonny's nervous accomplice, a character based on Salvatore Natural. And what about his haircut in that movie?
I love it.
It almost looks like yours, Bond.
So once again, I don't want to give away too much stuff, but I think they did a pretty good job in the movie, kind of giving you some of the vibe, I think, of New York at the time. I think that they did a very good job at setting that stage, and even some of the haircuts were pretty good for the time.
The film quickly became one of the most acclaimed crime movies ever made. Critics praised its realism, its intense performances, and the way it captured the chaotic energy of New York City during the 70s. Pacino's portrayal of the desperate robber shouting "Attica, Attica" in front of a roaring crowd became one of the most iconic scenes in film history. But while the movie was remarkably faithful to the real events in many ways, Hollywood inevitably made changes to the story. Some details were simplified, some characters were altered, and certain events were dramatized for the screen like many films do that are based on true stories anyway. Dog Day Afternoon exists somewhere between historical record and cinematic storytelling. So as we get closer to the close of this episode, it's worth looking at how the film compares to the real events that inspired it.
I'm going to say that hopefully it's not like Public Enemies. That was a horrible movie, in my opinion. Love the topic, love the actors. They missed it. So hopefully they didn't take too many creative, liberties on this. But in many ways, the movie was pretty close to the story. The central figure. Words are hard. Words are hard.
Stay in
The
school.
central figure played by Al Pacino was clearly based on John Wojtowicz. The motivations behind the robbery was largely the same. Just like in real life, the character robs a bank in order to help pay for his partner's gender-affirming surgery. The chaotic nature of the robbery was also portrayed quite accurately in both events, the film and the movie, or the real life. The plan quickly falls apart. The bank has far less money than expected, and the situation escalates into a prolonged hostage standoff surrounded by police and spectators. One of the most famous moments in the film was when Sonny stands outside the bank shouting "Attica," which I was trying to figure out for a minute how he knew about Attica, Indiana, all the way in New York City in 1972. Was it even a town in 1972? Who knows? Because nobody goes to Attica for fun.
You should go there just to stand next to the sign that says "Welcome to Attica,"
And have you shouting "Attica, Attica."
Unless you go for Badlands Off-Road Park. That's the only thing.
and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've never heard that before."
Probably not. But like I said, chanting Attica to the cheering crowd. He was drawn directly. This was directly from real life. John Wojtowicz truly did shout those words, referencing the Attica prison riot. And the crowds outside really did respond with cheers. However, some of the elements were altered or simplified for storytelling purposes. In the movie, the characters are given different names. The names are changed to protect the innocent. And certain relationships are streamlined to make the narrative easier to follow for the audience. Why I can't figure out why Lord of the Rings didn't streamline some of that 3-hour movie to make it make more sense is beyond me. That's for another day.
It made perfect sense. He's just ADHD.
3 hours and you accomplished nothing except kill Triple H. And that's it. Some of the dialogue was recreated or inspired by real conversations rather than taken directly from transcripts. The ending of the film considers or condenses the final events at the airport for dramatic effect, though the essential outcome remains the same. His accomplice was killed and the main robber was captured. Despite those changes, many historians and film critics still consider Dog Day Afternoon one of the most accurate depictions of a real-life crime story put on screen. I thought that watching the movie, to shoot him inside of the vehicle was very risky.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't think that's what happened, because it's just one of those things that they're going to take as little risk as possible. So in the end, the strange story of the Brooklyn bank robbery occupies a unique place in American history. It was a crime driven by desperation, like we said, rather than emotion and greed, a public spectacle that blurred the lines between tragedy and theater, and ultimately the real life events that provided such a compelling real life that provided so compelling it became one of the most infamous. I don't think I keep saying that. I don't know if I agree. Maybe for the time. You've got The Godfather that came out like 2 years before this with Al Pacino in like his breakout role. And we're going to call this like one of the greatest crime movies. Like The Godfather is a crime movie, right?
This one's a true.
This is a true crime movie, Dustin.
See, so I think, is that what is the difference, is because it's in a different subcategory of crime?
That's what I would say. That's like, that's not a horror movie. That's a ghost movie or something. You know what I'm saying?
Supernatural movie.
It's a crime movie that was filmed somewhat on location in the city that it was in.
But you got to remember, some of the movies that you're probably thinking about came out after this.
Yeah, but we're talking now.
I know, but I'm talking about it. They're saying, you know, at the time it was probably one of the greatest crime movies, because I mean, you've got what, Heat comes to mind, Casino.
I think for the time, not ever made. I just that one doesn't sit right. So,
but at that point, it probably was ever made at that time.
Yeah, I think, you know, way better movies like Donnie Brasco we should be talking about, because that was a way better case.
I said better movie, not a
way better.
No.
For John Wojtowicz, the robbery that was meant to last 10 minutes changed his life forever. For the rest of the world, it became a story that continues to fascinate audiences more than 50 years later. I will give it that. And like many of the other stories that we talk about here, it serves as a reminder that sometimes the truth is every bit as strange and as dramatic as the movies.
So what happened to him? He was out in 5 years. What happened to him?
That's a good question.
He became a senator.
He's now a congressman.
You take this like, one day I will be president.
Yeah.
Me, mayor? I'm going to be mayor.
When John Wojtowicz was taken into custody after the chaotic events at the John F. Kennedy International Airport, the story that had captivated the country seemed like it was finally over. The 14-hour hostage crisis had ended. The surviving hostages had been freed, and the robber, who stood at the center of the strange spectacle, was now facing the consequences of his actions. But the story doesn't end there, my brothers. In the years that followed, the lives of these people involved in the robbery continued to unfold in strange and unexpected ways. After pleading guilty to bank robbery and hostage-taking, Wojtowicz was sentenced to prison. Although the original sentence could have kept him incarcerated for decades, he ultimately served about 5 years before being released. While he was in prison, something unusual happened that would further cement his place in pop culture. Hollywood came calling.
Ring, ring.
Can you imagine? After a journalist wrote the now famous Life magazine article, Boys in the Bank, filmmakers became fascinated by the bizarre robbery. Producers eventually approached Wojtowicz about purchasing the rights to his story so that it could be turned into a film. Wojtowicz reportedly sold the rights for $7,500.
So 2 years salary.
How much was the surgery?
And the movie was $2,500.
So he could have paid for the surgery.
But not without robbing the place.
The boys in the bank are always hard.
It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference to someone who had spent much of his life struggling financially. According to several accounts, part of that money was used to help pay for the gender-affirming surgery that Elizabeth Eden had long hoped to receive. Eden did eventually undergo the surgery she wanted, though her life remained complicated and difficult. She continued to struggle with mental health issues for years after the robbery. Sadly, she later died from complications related to AIDS in 1987, a tragedy that reflected the devastating impacts the AIDS crisis had on many communities during that era. As for Wojtowicz, he had mixed feelings about the film that made his story famous. When Dog Day Afternoon was released in 1975, he watched his life portrayed on screen by Al Pacino. He reportedly admired Pacino's performance, but also complained that parts of the story had been exaggerated or misunderstood by filmmakers. In typical Wojtowicz fashion, he remained outspoken about the movie for the rest of his life, occasionally giving interviews where he offered his own perspective on what really happened. After being released from prison, Wojtowicz attempted to rebuild his life. He worked various jobs, including running a small business and occasionally appearing in interviews or documentaries about the robbery. For the rest of his life, however, he remained permanently linked to the strange crime that had once turned him into a national curiosity. He died in 2006 at the age of 60.
You would think that whoever, I'm going to buy these rights from you, that movie company would have paid for that surgery. Like, hey, you did this for this. Let's make sure this gets taken care of by the best doctor.
They pretty much did.
Well, they gave him money. He had to pay it. You'd think they would just be like, hey, like, what you did was noble. Let's take care of it.
There was no GoFundMe back then.
Oh, man, I tried that for my race car. That didn't work.
So
GoFundMe is a scam.
I think what would have been great is if he like worked the Comic-Con scene.
Oh, yeah.
And so like he went to all the cons and you're like, hey, I'm going to go get John Wojtowicz's autograph. And you like stand in line and get a picture with him and stuff. He should have worked the cons.
Working the con. Like I there's some guys that make it out alive and they've got fascinating stories to tell. And not all of them get told. This story is getting told, but I don't want to like talk to a serial killer, but some of these guys that like try to skyjack a plane they just have to be fascinating to talk to because there's a charisma and a bit of recklessness that I think you have to do that. And if this guy was so charismatic as he was, which I'm sure that's a lot of it's what sold the movie idea and everything, you just got to take it and run with it and go make money taking pictures and kissing babies. So looking back at this crime more than 50 years later, the Brooklyn bank robbery stands out as one of the most unusual bank robberies in American history. It wasn't carefully orchestrated or carried out by professional criminals. Instead, it was somebody that was desperate. And it was complicated, and the relationships between the people were complicated. It's also one of the earliest crimes to unfold in front of a live audience, basically, whether it be on TV. I'm sure the radio, I'm sure it was all over the radio as well. Thousands of people gathered outside the bank that day, cheering and reacting as everything unfolded. Television cameras captured the chaos in real time, turning a local crime into a national phenomenon. In many ways, the robbery foreshadowed the modern era of live news coverage and the public fascination with high-profile crimes. What we do here, a lot of them are lower, not huge, but a lot of high-profile stuff. And perhaps the most strange aspect of it all, the bizarre events on that hot summer day in Brooklyn would go down to inspire, movies, and I'm sure there's books about it, documentaries, magazine articles. That failed 10-minute robbery, like I said, it's definitely ingrained into the fabric of America. All right, Jimbo. I think we got something else to talk about, but not here.
Well, Bond, we want to thank you for coming on Dark Discoveries and discussing this true life of story of Wojtowicz and his failed bank robbery attempt and the hostage situation.
We are open to have you back, but you have to missay some stuff. Like, you can't be all prim and perfect. You got to screw up because that's kind of...
You got to give me harder words than Wojtowicz.
Wow.
Challenge accepted.
So if you probably haven't noticed, if you listen to the intro, the 3 different intros that I wrote for this podcast, You won't know this, but like you may notice it from listening to other people. I butchered every section I did.
I know.
I didn't say something right every time.
That's why I left it in.
It's one of those things. We're not prim. We're not perfect.
Oh man, I would love to be back. I'd love the podcast that you guys are throwing together. I think it's a perfect mix of comedy, true crime, mystery, and mermaids. It's just amazing.
Mermaids aren't. I got all kinds of stuff if I get over my ADD breaks and get to writing, because I've got lots and lots and lots of stuff in this head.
But just be careful if you're ever working out at the gym and you put on a Dark Discoveries episode. It might not be safe for your health or safety if you're listening to Dark Discoveries while you're lifting weights.
Make sure you're not doing any heavy lifting. That's for sure. Make sure it's a treadmill day.
Well, Dustin, where can they find us on the social medias?
So they can find us on Facebook, Dark Discovery Podcast. There is a private group, but I'm not going to let you in if you don't answer the questions, because that's how spam bots get in.
What's the question?
We don't want spam bots.
What's the answer?
I can't tell you what the question is.
He don't even remember. That's the problem.
Answer it. It pops up. I'll know the answer because they're basic. I think it's who's your favorite host, and it's always me.
So if you say Jackie, then you're like, I'm sorry, you're not allowed.
Denied.
I deny and be like, answer again. We're on TikTok, Instagram, either under Dark Discoveries Pod. I can't keep up with all of that. We're trying to get better on social media.
You say that every episode. When's the last time you opened up TikTok?
I looked to see if I could copy your paste for the Bell Guinness stuff, but I ended up doing it myself. I just love the fact that looking over everything, I get to see like 30 different countries that we've been downloaded in. We got more in South Korea again. We're so close to North Korea. We're going to get one download in North Korea. I don't care if it's through a VPN, how we get it. We're going to be in North Korea and on Kim Jong-un's or whatever his name is. We're going to be on his hit list. Okay. We're going to be.
Hey, we may be his favorite. We may be his favorite podcast.
Maybe they're going to put a bounty on us like they did.
No, not me. I'm staying away from that.
They're going to put a bounty on my head just like they did John Wayne's.
There you go.
Because.
Well, if you like this episode, please hop on over and check out the Tragedy of Cinema podcast's companion episode on the movie Dog Day Afternoon.
And if you like what I did, darkdiscoveriespod@gmail.com. Send me your feedback. If you do not like what we did, tragedyofcinema.com@gmail.com is where you can tell Jimbo.
Yeah, because nobody's going to go to that because that won't pull up because you can't go to the tragedyofcinema.com@gmail.com.
Whatever. It's getting.
Oh, you can. It won't get you anywhere, but you can go.
I guess that would be up Jimbo's alley for me to give it to him wrong. So that way it's like returned email.
Some spam bot's like, why do I keep getting all these emails that nobody answers? But
now this is part one, man. This is part one. You got to go check out part two.
Yeah.
And then James Bond over here. James Bond. I don't think we're allowed to give his email out. So
no.
He is from parts unknown, and we're going to
South Texas.
I'm just going to say he's part of the Von Erich family. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, South Texas. We're going to be, I don't know, somewhere within 20,000 square miles.
All right.
You from? I'm at least 8 hours from the next big city.
But this has been Dark Discoveries.
Where the deeper you dive.
You don't know what we see. You never listen to the end of the episode.
I never get to the end of the episode.
Wow. All right, let's try that again. This has been Dark Discoveries, where the deeper you dive,
the darker it gets.